Hi, I'm Jennifer, and I'm the founder of Humanist Learning Systems. And I have several books about humanism and online courses. And one of those courses is about reality-based problem solving. I get asked about this a lot, about critical thinking and how we solve problems. And most of my courses are actually about how we make decisions with regards to how we solve our problems. And today I want to talk about how we solve the world's problems. All right. Humanism is a philosophy of life that without supernaturalism affirms our ability and our responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. All right, so the motto of my company is applied science, compassionate ethics, and personal responsibility for solutions that actually work. How do we combine applied science, compassionate ethics, and personal responsibility for solutions that actually work? Now, when we're talking about solving the world's problems, we have to talk about responsibility first and foremost. And a lot of people think in order to be happy, I need to evade responsibility. We have business owners. We just had a big old forum with the president about how to eliminate regulations so that we can build our businesses, right? And I was horrified by that because regulations are about responsibility, all right? And the fact that not everybody who's in business is responsible. And so in order for people to not cheat and hurt our environment and our communities, we have rules. That's what a regulation is. It's a rule that a business cannot hurt people. And the idea that businesses have to be allowed to hurt people in order to have a business is ludicrous to me. It's just ludicrous. It's so backwards. It's frightening. All right. The reality is, in order to be responsible, we need to be responsible so that we can fix our problems, not just in a way that benefits us, but that benefits our customers, that benefits the communities in which we live. If we are not doing all three of those things, then we are harming people, and that is unacceptable. And I refuse to accept the idea that businesses need to be free to hurt people in order to have a business, that there's a greater good that businesses can have. There are plenty of businesses. Most businesses do not harm people in the course of their businesses. And the businesses that demand the right to be able to hurt people to run their businesses shouldn't be in business. Just want to make that clear. All right? So, let's talk about taking a humanistic approach to problem solving and to the world of business as it involves solving the world's problems. All right? The methodology that humanists use is we use applied science to come up with solutions that'll actually work, and we define work, like solving the world's problems, through compassion. If it helps people, it's good. If it hurts people, it's bad. Okay? So let's talk about how we actually go about doing this. Now, in order to solve a problem, we need to think critically. And that's not easy for us to do, especially when we talk about politics. Like, this is the ultimate, where we go to discuss how we're going to solve the world's problems is the realm of politics. We elect people to go to Washington, D.C. to argue about these things for us. All right, and the problem we have is that humans are not naturally critical thinkers. We're very tribal in our thinking. Our side good, the other side bad. And this tribalism negatively impacts our ability to make decisions that are rational, right? So in order to get past this tribalism, and I don't know how many times, I do this too, right? I'm a political animal. I have my ideas on what would work to fix whatever the problem is. And I think my way would work and the other person's way is wrong. But that's not actually, I might be right, but I also might be wrong. And it's really hard for me to know how much of my thinking is based on tribalism versus how much of my thinking is based on critical thinking. Now, I've tricked myself into thinking I'm thinking critically, and then it turns out I was absolutely wrong. I wasn't evaluating the evidence properly because I was blinded by my tribalism. We all do this. Right? And this is where personal responsibility comes in. Because if I'm not responsible enough to think critically and to move past my inherent, innate tribalism that is instinctual to the human animal, then other people why should I expect other people to think critically too? All right. So this is about personal responsibility. It's about how I personally am committed as a humanist to working on the world's problems. And I am committed to thinking critically and not tribally about this. Now, what does that mean in practice? It means that when I'm presented with someone else saying, I think there's a better way to do this, I'm going to not label them as evil. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, even if I think their proposal would cause a lot of suffering and harm. I'm not going to label them as other and evil. All right, because that's not thinking critically, that's thinking tribally. Other equals evil. All right, that's tribal thinking. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke my compassion for the other person, and I'm going to bring them into my circle of compassion. So in the United States, I'm not going to look at left-right dichotomy and say, if you're not on my side of that divide, you're evil. I'm going to say we're all Americans. I might not understand why you're proposing what you're proposing, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you're doing it because you think this will somehow help people. Because most people don't wake up and say, I'm just going to go out and hurt people today. No one says, I'm sure someone says that, but almost no one says that, right? So if someone's got a different idea of me than me, it's probably not because they want to hurt people, right? It's probably because they have a different idea on how to do things. And so me stepping back and viewing them through the lens of compassion as a full member of the human family that wouldn't intentionally hurt people helps me to move past the tribalism so that I can have that conversation about, well, what is it that they're trying to do and why do they think this will work? That's critical thinking. But I can only get there by invoking my compassion for the people I disagree with. I don't know of any other way to get there. All right, so let's start being compassionate with ourselves for our tendency to think critically, and then use that compassion to look at the other as fully human, fully vested in compassion, with ideas that may be worth considering. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe they're not. But I won't know unless I'm willing to consider them, and that requires compassion. The second thing we're going to use compassion for is to help us decide what is a good solution, right? A good solution is one that helps people and doesn't hurt people. If it hurts people, it's bad. If it helps people, it's good. And the challenge is not just to do good for someone. It's to do good while not doing harm to others. That's what makes problem solving so difficult. Let me give you an example. I live in Manatee County, Florida. We are currently, I think, the epicenter for drug overdose deaths in the state of Florida. And before that, we were the epicenter for the pill mill epidemic in Florida. And we got rid of our pill mill problem by closing all the pill mills down. And the result of that, closing these pill mills down, was a rash of heroin overdoses. People are dying now. We closed the pill mills, fixed that problem, and caused a bunch of deaths as a result. Right? No one who was shutting the pills mills down was doing it to cause death. Right? Like, no one involved in this discussion said, I know, let's make things worse by killing people, and then we won't have a drug problem. That wasn't the intent. The intent was to help people who were being harmed by the pill mills through addiction, the cause of addiction, to help them stop being addicted. And we did that in a way, though our intentions were good, that caused more harm. Right? So it's not enough to be compassionate. Right? It's not enough to want to do good. We have a personal responsibility to make sure that the solutions we put forth actually help people and not hurt them. Because often we hurt people accidentally. And that's not acceptable to me as a humanist. I want a solution that actually works and doesn't cause additional harm. And to do that, I have to keep compassion first and foremost, but I also have to adhere to reality. All right? The reality is our actions have consequences, and those consequences can be good, and those consequences could be bad. And they're not necessarily going to be good just because my intention is good. All right? And to find out whether or not the proposals I have are actually going to do good, I have to look at the science. I don't know of how else we are going to do that. What has worked in the past, what doesn't work, what's really causing our problem. And I have a course on reality-based decision making where I talk about this methodology. How do we figure out what's really going to work? And how are we going to do that through reality-based decision making, right? And one of the big problems we have is we don't ask the right questions. We're trying to solve the wrong problem. My county collectively decided that we were going to solve the problem of pill mills by shutting the pill mills down. The pill mills were the problem. The pill mills weren't the problem. The pill mills were a symptom of the problem. The problem was addiction and pain. Medical pain that was not being fixed through the medical system, right? When we look at the individuals buying from the pill mills through the lens of compassion, these are not drug addicts. These are people like you and me that have problems that they're trying to fix, and the medical system's not helping them with their medical problems, and except through this little thing, well, you can buy these pills. That's the cheapest way to deal with it. That gives us a very different view of the problem than a very narrow thing. We have these pill mills, we need to get rid of them, right? And because we took the very narrow view, we have these pill mills, we have to get rid of them, we ended up with an opium epidemic. And I'm laughing, but it's laughing through the tears because it's horrifying what has happened in my community. It's horrifying. And, it's so bad that we're finally at the point where we are realizing that these drug addicts are not evil people, that they're human beings that are suffering, and that the real solution has to be, how do we help them stop suffering so that we can get them off the drugs, so that they stop killing themselves with heroin and other laced drugs, right? The solution to this problem is not anger. It's not punishment. If we're going to solve this, we need science, and we need compassion, and we need responsibility. That's the only way we solve this problem. And it doesn't matter what the problem is, whether we're talking about healthcare access, or we're talking about the environment, or we're talking about a problem within your business. It doesn't matter what the problem is. The way we're going to solve them is with science and compassion and personal responsibility. Which brings me to the last point I want to make about this, and this has to do with optimism. The humanist approach is very optimistic. We believe we have the ability and therefore the responsibility to solve our problems in a way that doesn't just benefit ourselves, but benefits our communities and the world in which we live. And we believe that we actually can do that we have the intelligence required to really solve our problems, if we take a reasoned, compassionate approach to doing it. Now that's the ideal, and if I say this, every single person watching this video is going to go, yes, of course. That would be ideal. That's what I want. And since we all want that, why aren't we doing this? Well, I'll tell you why I think we don't do that. And it's a combination of anger and tribalism. I am outraged about so many things that are happening right now. I can't even begin to tell you that the heroin epidemic is just one of many things that is really deeply upsetting to me. If someone I love died from an overdose, I can't even begin to tell you what my emotional response to that would be. I can't even go there. It's so upsetting to think, just to even think about the level of anger I would have towards the people who were dealing to them and giving them the bad drugs. And right now my county is starting to charge those people with murder, right? That anger, we want to punish people, right? So one of the things that happened in the last election was one of the methods of thinking was, well, where are the drugs that are killing my loved ones coming from? They're coming from other countries. Well, let's keep those people and those drugs out, right? That's actually a really rational way of thinking, right? But it's based in the anger. The anger is the motivation to create the change. But then what we do with it, we either think critically about it, will this really work? Or we latch on to the first thing that we think will work. in our anger. And anger tends to make us latch onto something, and that something may or may not work. All right? And that's the problem with anger. It's not a very rational emotion. It's a very useful emotion. It motivates us to create change. But if we're not careful and step back and think, okay, what's really going to work? And that requires us to think compassionately about our problems so that we can think critically, so that we can look at the science to find out what would really work. Then we're never going to get a problem solved. So we get into anger, we think this will solve our problems, and we lash out and try to fix it. And that almost never works to fix the problem. The anger-based approach almost never works. Because one of the things anger wants us to do is we want to punish. We want to punish the people who are responsible for our pain. And that almost never works to fix the problem. So we need to go back and invoke our compassion so that we can think critically and optimistically and use science to get those solutions that work. So replacing our anger with compassion and our frustration and our tribalism with compassion and working optimistically to solve our problem with love so that we don't just hurt people who are hurting us, but that we actually solve the problem so that no one gets hurt is the ideal. And that's how you solve a problem, by using reason and compassion and putting them into action. All right? Like I said, I have an online course called Reality-Based Decision Making for More Effective Strategy Development. And the course really goes into critical thinking skills, but more importantly, it goes into problems. What is a problem-solving methodology that will actually work? And we have to identify what our real problem is. That we have to identify what's really causing that problem, and then we have to identify what will really work to solve it. And the number one thing people do wrong is they don't identify the problem. And I know that seems like mind-blowing, but if we don't define the problem properly, we don't solve it. My county decided it had a pill mill problem. It didn't really have a pill mill problem, it had an addiction problem. But as long as we were focused on the pill mill part of how this problem was manifesting with the pill mills, we weren't solving our addiction problem. We have an addiction problem. Our community has an addiction problem. And until we start asking questions about what is causing those addictions and how we might help people stop being addicted, we're never going to solve this problem. So asking the right questions is critical, but we can't ask those questions until we start thinking critically and not tribally and not angrily. Okay? And I really, the course is really, people are giving me good response on it. They say it's very, very helpful to identify the methodology of how we approach problem solving in the first place. So hope to see you online.